Good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome to the series Learning Through Literature as we continue to go through the memoir of Virginia Roberts Giuffre and her memoir, Nobody's Girl. If you are not familiar with Virginia Roberts Giuffre, she is was one of the most outspoken victims of Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. If you missed any of the previous parts, you can find them at TazJ77 on YouTube. And if you need a moment during the course of tonight's reading, please take as many breaks as you need. Shortly after we conclude this broadcast, tonight's will be added to the playlist of Nobody's Girl on YouTube as well. Preemptive trigger warning, as always. Multiple forms of abuse are detailed in this book. More often than not, intimate abuse. We begin tonight at chapter 18, entitled Honeymooners. Look, if you had one shot or one opportunity to seize everything you ever wanted in one moment, would you capture it or just let it slip? In the soundtrack of my life, no song better fits the start of my new life with Robbie than Eminem's Lose Yourself, which was released just days after we were married. At the beginning of our relationship, still so new to one another, but already completely attached, we must have listened to that song 1,000 times. You better lose yourself in the music. The moment you own it, you better never let it go. Eminem warned us, and we listened. You only get one shot. Do not miss your chance to blow. This opportunity comes once in a lifetime, Eminem rapped, and I believed him. Robbie was my one shot, my true love, a gift I had never imagined I'd receive. You got that right, chickens. You better leave Eminem out of this. And I don't know if Robbie was exactly a gift. The day after our wedding, we'd moved out of the Royal Princess and found cheaper accommodations. You didn't have a choice. Your new husband messed up a cushy deal. But I digress. I also let the massage school know I was withdrawing. Let's continue. I'd loved my brief interlude with ITM, and I had completed 2 of its 5 levels of instruction, but I didn't have enough of my own money to continue. Besides, Robbie wanted to take me on a honeymoon with what? Thoughts and prayers? Like I said yesterday, if Robbie was smart, he wouldn't have had her call and be all puff chest alpha female with Epstein and Maxwell, and they could have had money to have their honeymoon so she could finish, so she could have a career, all of these things. But okay. I think we spent 3 more days in Chiang Mai. Then, after a quick luggage exit, Robbie said I could only take 3 of my 6 suitcases. We set off by train. We were headed to Vientiane, the capital city of Laos, 400 miles or so to the east, to get my passport stamped. Robbie was hoping that if we pinched our pennies, we could travel around Thailand for a few months, but my student visa was set to run out in just a few weeks. If I left the country, even briefly, and then entered again, Robbie had been told the clock would restart, and I'd have more time to explore. So while Vientiane was hardly a romantic destination, that's where we needed to go. When we arrived, tired and sweaty, it was late afternoon. Robbie had warned me that the place was far from picturesque, but I was still appalled by the sight of children squatting and urinating in the streets. He made you give up accommodations, and this is your. Why does he know so much? How many times has he been married? Soldiers were everywhere, just waiting to enforce the 9 p.m. curfew. We were so obviously tourists when Robbie somehow carrying my 3 suitcases and his own big backpack, and I knew we stuck out like sore thumbs. So once we got proof of my visit to Laos stamped in ink on my passport, I told Robbie I wanted to get out of there. We took a boat back across Mekong River, found a cheap hotel, and slept in Thailand that night. In the morning, we got on another train. Our next stop, 800 miles south, was Surat Thani, a transport hub where we'd catch a bus and later a ferry that would deliver us to our ultimate destination, Koh Phangan, an island that Robbie and Matt had visited when they first arrived in Thailand. This magical place, one of 3 islands off the southeastern coast in the Gulf of Thailand, was renowned for its monthly full moon party, an all night celebration tied to the lunar calendar that attracted throngs of tourists. But Robbie promised me the island was also the perfect place to spend one on one time, beautiful, peaceful, affordable. Sitting on a bench in the crowded, rusty ferry boat that took us from the mainland to Koh Phangan's Thong Sala Beach, I was transfixed by the view. The ocean was an unbelievable shade of luminescent blue, and above it, like frosting on a cake, was the lighter blue strip of the sky. A Thai man next to us was carrying a rooster that he had trained to sit on command. Every time the rooster sat down, I burst out laughing. Robbie held me tight with one powerful arm. I was happy. Stepping onto the dock of Thong Sala Beach, we were immediately surrounded by locals, all of them tugging at our sleeves, even more determined than the next to lure us to stay in the hotel he or she was there to represent. One young man handed Robbie a printed business card that said Two Sons Resort. On the card, handwritten in English, I can get you anything you want. Robbie looked at me and grinned. Two Sons would be our place. For less than $6 a night, we rented a private bungalow 100 feet from the ocean. The resort was run by a family who cooked all our meals. I was still shy about eating new foods. Epstein's strict diet regimens had made me hyper-focused on remaining thin. And even the blandest Asian delicacies, pad thai noodles, say, seemed off-putting. But Robbie was encouraging, and for him, I tried to be brave. Girl, it's food. Thai beer was cheap, and the sun was hot. Truly, we were in paradise. As we lay around on the sand, Robbie and I began really getting to know one another. He told me about his parents, Antonina and Frank. His dad had once worked painting and refurbishing fishing boats, but now the family ran a catering business in Sydney. Robbie told me about his older siblings, 2 brothers, Gaetano, who everyone called Sky, and Frank Jr., and a sister, Angela. Robbie had dropped out of high school because he was bored, he said, though he'd later finish another year through a correspondence course. At 17, he'd moved out of his parents' house and lived for a few years with a Korean woman who became his fiancée despite her parents' objections. I knew there had to be somebody else in there. I stayed longer than I needed to, he said of that relationship. Indeed, while he'd never lacked for female companionship, Robbie tended to be a one woman man, not a player. We'll stick a pin in that and come back to that later. He said he'd always prided himself on having close women friends, and he was often the bloke who gave these Sheilas romantic advice. I just bet he is. I bet he's friend zoned so many people instead of just being a friend. My new husband had strong opinions, I was learning, but also understood that people moved at their own pace. I don't think he understood that. He's a podcast mic bro. Oh, absolutely. That's what it sounds like. To be a bully basher, you must have a sixth sense for spotting vulnerability. But Robbie's response, the polar opposite of Epstein's, was to help, not to hurt. Was it though? Because in the previous chapter, that's all he talked about. He called himself a bully basher. He didn't say anything about helping the people who had been bullied. He didn't say anything about asking them how they wanted things to be resolved. He didn't say anything about uplifting them. And you're right, he is good at spotting vulnerability. We need that to click. We need that to click. Robbie asked more about my family and my upbringing too, and bit by bit I divulged the ugliest parts of my childhood. As I described what my father and Forrest had done to me and what my mother had failed to do in response, I saw anger in Robbie's eyes. Right, anger, not compassion, not empathy, not care, not concern, not asking what would make her feel safe and protected now. All families have their difficulties, his face said, but this was beyond the pale. Where were your brothers? He demanded, clearly imagining how he would have reacted if his sister had been mistreated. It's never how you imagine it in your head, ever. I explained that Danny was sent away to boarding school and that Scotty was a kid too small to defend me. And besides, neither of them knew, because I never told them. Robbie just shook his head, then opened his arms wide to envelop me in a hug. At one point, I asked Robbie if he believed in God. God is like the wind, he said, explaining how reading about paganism had taught him to see God in nature. Can you see the wind? No, but you can feel it when it brushes your cheek. Did I believe in God? I couldn't answer that. I'd always been comforted by the idea of reincarnation because it promised that my piss poor excuse for a life was not the only one I was going to get. But God, I wasn't sure. Haddon Forrest, one of my earliest abusers, invoked God to manipulate me, just as the counselors at Growing Together had done. In my experience, God had been wielded by others to get what they wanted. Still, meeting Robbie at the very moment I needed him the most seemed the best evidence I'd ever had of the existence of something divine. Lying in the sand on that pristine island, exchanging stories about our lives and our beliefs, we covered a lot of ground in a short time. Well, I hope so, because y'all already married. And you done already dropped out of school and lost your only form of income for him. For example, we talked about how Robbie's spirituality dovetailed with his interest in fighting. He'd grown up watching Monkey Magic, a wacky cult Japanese TV show that played on Australian TV every Sunday night. From the moment he discovered the show, whose title character is an ape, a skilled fighter, and the king of his tribe who achieves enlightenment through martial arts, Robbie was fascinated with the Buddhist concept of Satori, the sudden comprehension of one's true nature. The nature of Monkey was impressionable, said the voiceover in the show's opening montage, and Robbie could relate. That his spiritual awakening owed such a debt to a badly dubbed 1980s TV series could be seen as funny. He knew. But hey, he said, you take your illumination wherever you can find it. He sounds like the neo hippie guys that act like they're so deep and so in tune and so unassuming but so protective. And they're the biggest abusers of all. Martial arts is not just about fighting, he told me. It's a way of thinking, a way of life. Robbie was fascinated by the idea that through intense physical conditioning, you could prepare yourself for anything. One of my teachers was all about controlling your punches, Robbie told me. You were not allowed to land a hit. You had to stop an inch away from your opponent's face. Instead of dominating them with force, you blocked their blows and let them wear themselves out. We used to take broken bottles and scrape up our shins so that after a while we couldn't feel anything. My body got conditioned to the point where if someone hit me, I just look at them and smile. Now, somebody going through that after Virginia divulged everything that had happened to her since the age of around 6 to 7 years old, you would think would understand how she has navigated through life up until this point, the numbing of herself and things like that. But no, he still wanted to position himself as the great white knight, the ultimate savior, and he's trying to justify it. I'd never set foot inside a boxing ring, but I understood at least a version of what Robbie was talking about. Shoring yourself up to increase the odds of your own survival. I'd spent my life blocking the blows of others, wishing they'd tire of abusing me. And at least for a while, I'd gotten good at blotting out feelings while keeping a smile plastered on my face. Robbie's experience helped me look at my own from a different vantage point. I flashed on the mantra I'd learned at ITM, the Pali prayer in which we asked to attain the knowledge of all nature. Was this how I would do that? Not just knowledge of the world around me, but of my internal self. I sensed that I was beginning a process that would not be easy. One thing, though, could not have been easier: hanging out with Robbie. Being with him never felt like a chore. Despite our differences, we seemed to move at the same rhythm. He introduced me to an Australian rock band called Powderfinger, and I fell in love with their biggest hit, whose lyrics, "My happiness is slowly creeping back. Now you're at home. If it ever starts sinking in, it must be when you pack up and go," described to a T the feeling of pining for a lover who's far away. I told Robbie I never wanted to be far away from him. Oh, he's definitely in the habit of making himself agreeable. Definitely. One night I told Robbie there was something I needed him to help me do. First, we went to a bar in Koh Phangan so I could sip a little liquid courage. "I think I've told you that Jeffrey Epstein prohibited tattoos," I said, taking a swallow of Thai whiskey. Robbie nodded. He had a yin and yang symbol on his right shoulder that I'd admired, but he knew I didn't have any ink. "Well, there's a tattoo parlor next door, and I need you to come with me and hold my hand." A few minutes later, I told a Thai tattoo artist what I wanted and where I wanted it, and then lay face down on the table. Soon I had a blue butterfly to symbolize the freedom of flight, and the words, "In love with Robbie G," on the small of my back. Not a tramp stamp. It was the time. It was the time. Very few of us escaped that time without a tramp stamp, but it was the time. We listen and we don't judge her, but everybody else we judge. We don't judge Virginia, but everybody else we judge, and we judge hard. Okay? In case you haven't figured out, we ride for Virginia here. Everybody else can get it. Actually, the artist misspelled Robbie using only one B. Good. To this day, in my phone, my husband's contact number is filed under Robie, Robie. In my mind, my new tattoo accomplished two goals. First, declaring my commitment to Robbie for all the world to see. How would the whole, you know what? And second, guaranteeing that I would repulse Epstein, who shunned tattooed girls. As I told Robbie, only half joking, this is an insurance policy. Well, Epstein and cannibals don't like people with tattoos. But here's the thing, Robbie was there with her. He didn't notice that they were spelling his name wrong? Robbie, can you read? Because now Jeffrey wouldn't want me, even if he could make me come back. We must have been at the Two Sons for about a week when Matt showed up for a visit. Back in Chiang Mai, Matt a had at first been worried when he heard how quickly Robbie and I planned to wed. He thought Robbie's parents would kill him for not somehow slowing us down. Robbie had always had a way with the ladies, Matt knew. I don't think I've ever known him to be single, he'd tell me later. But Matt could see that Robbie's and my connection was deeper than those he'd witnessed before. So Matt had stood up for us at the mountaintop temple, and now he had arrived to make sure all was well. When did Matt get there? Because the whole time we detailed their nuptials in that day, nobody said anything about Matt being there because we talked about it yesterday, and I was like, if they're besties, why weren't they there? And what kind of way did Robbie have with the ladies that Matt would have to step in? Like, was this a regular occurrence that he was just out here dulling out engagement rings that was turning fingers green? You know how you can learn a lot about people by the company they keep? Sometimes, sometimes not. From ITM, I already knew Matt had a kind of way about him, but to see Matt and Robbie together showed me a different side of my new husband. They teased each other relentlessly, but with affection. Are they dating? Matt had had a rough upbringing after his parents divorced. He'd left his mother's home at 15, moved to Sydney in search of his father. After he and Robbie met, Robbie's family had eventually taken Matt in. They'd been friends ever since. We were on the beach, but Robbie left home at 17. So we're just going to keep going by what they told her and what she's telling us. This He left. They were on the beach drinking beer when Matt turned to Robbie with a serious look on his face. Do you think it's a coincidence, Rob? He asked. What are you talking about? Robbie said. Petra, Matt said. And I watched Robbie's mouth drop open. Robbie is a talker. It's usually hard to get a word in edgewise around him. But now he was mute, and his tan, brown face had gone a little pale. Who's Petra? I asked. Matt looked at Robbie and, after getting a nod of approval, turned to me. You know by now that Rob is a searcher, he began. Well, about 2 years ago, we heard about a psychic named Petra who lived out in Campbelltown, that's west of Sydney. Friends told us she was the real deal. Matt was reluctant to go see her, he said, but not because he doubted her powers. He had an aunt who could see the future, so he knew such people existed. For a variety of reasons, however, he didn't want to know what life had in store for him. Robbie, though, was gung ho. He couldn't wait to track Petra down. Quick question. If this is Robbie's story to tell, and Robbie was the one that wanted to know his future, why did Robbie need to get approval from Matt to tell the story? And what all. Let's just finish the story. So, what did Petra say? I asked. She said Rob would travel a long distance, Matt said, to meet a blonde haired, blue eyed girl who would be his only one. I couldn't believe it. I turned to look at Robbie, who was shaking his head. Why do I feel like this is a con? I could be wrong. I could be wrong. They could have really went to go see this psychic and really told her, and that's why he was so rush, rush, rush. Let's get it done. But I feel like this was a pre-planned con. I do. I'd forgotten, mate, he stammered, clapping Matt on the shoulder. Then he took up a deep breath and turned back to me. So Matt knew this all along. Matt had this at the front of his head, but Matt asked Virginia, aka Jenny, to go with him where he knew his bestie Robbie was going to be. Knew that they were going fast and loose, but then was like, oh, I don't know if I should stop him because I don't want his parents to kill me. Like, did, Then he took a deep breath and turned back to me. He was still processing the memory. There's more to this story, Robbie said. Right before Matt and I left for Thailand, another good mate of mine asked me to be the best man at his wedding. When I told him I'd already bought my ticket to Bangkok, he tried to persuade me to push the trip back a month. But I said no. I don't know why I told him, but I've just got to go now. So now I'm realizing why. If I'd come a month later, I wouldn't have met you. This was like a fairy tale, I thought, as Robbie took my hand and held it. I told you I believe in us, baby, he said. I believe we were meant to be. Cue the 1990s music video of some goofy singing in head-to-toe leather in the middle of the desert, telling a heifer that he gonna love her forever, and then the next video he gonna be with another woman. Right, chick, and she was halfway through her course. She wasn't even halfway through her course. If I would have waited a month, I wouldn't have met you. Yes, she would have. And just everybody done gave up on school and everything. Get like all the plans that. Apparently, though, we were also meant to face adversity together. Robbie and I had befriended a charming 19-year-old Canadian, one of several travelers from all over the world who were staying at the Two Suns. After Matt said goodbye, promising to reconnect with us soon in Australia, we invited the Canadian to join us one night to party inside our bungalow. I thought this was supposed to be y'all honeymoon. We thought he was terrific until the next morning when we discovered most of our money was gone. Yeah, I saw that coming. Robbie ran outside half dressed and raced to the raised structure where the Canadian had been staying. But on the way, he encountered two Irish women who told him the guy had booked it out of there just after sunrise. We were out more than $2,000. We had only 200 or so left. So this protector was so good at protecting that somebody y'all don't know, you have no history with, you're his wife, and he let somebody stay in y'all bungalow. Months later, Robbie would say that the robbery was a blessing. It was time to get out of holiday mode and come down to earth, to get back into real life, he'd say. But in that moment, we panicked. The robbery meant our honeymoon was over, obviously. But worse than that, while Robbie had already bought his return ticket to Australia, I had no ticket to fly, and now we couldn't afford to buy one. Robbie called his parents. I'm sure they were wondering who was this woman who'd bewitched their son. No, they know who their son is. They know that you wasn't the one doing the bewitching. and who was now stranded with him, nearly penniless, on a remote tropical island. But they stepped up to help us, as they would do so many times in the coming years, paying $800 for my flight to Sydney and sending a little more money to tide us over until we got there, because once again, they know their son. We packed up and told the two sons goodbye, retraced our steps from our honeymoon paradise to Bangkok, and then checked into a dingy, dirt cheap backpackers' hotel to await our departure. There was one glitch in the plan. Robbie's parents had not been able to get me on his direct flight, so we'd be traveling separately. My flight would leave a few hours earlier than his did and would connect through Singapore. Realizing this, I was filled with dread. I'd come to rely on how secure Robbie made me feel. Girl, you got robbed with Robbie. I'm glad that's all that happened, but I don't know. Okay. The next day, as Robbie walked me to my gate at Bangkok International Airport, I didn't want to let go of his hand. I'll see you on the other side of the world, Robbie said, grinning. I tried to smile, too, but I didn't completely succeed. We kissed goodbye, and I got on the plane. Once again, just like yesterday, remember, different time, different country. Yes, there are times and places where, yes, you can still walk to the gate with people, all of those things. Because I know some of y'all are very nitpicky and be like, we can't do that. That's how I know she's lying. Don't do that. It turns out I was right to be nervous. When I landed in Singapore and tried to make my way to my connecting flight, customs officials descended upon me. If I was not an Australian citizen, they wanted to know, why did I only have a one-way ticket into the country? Reasons. Where, they demanded, was my travel visa to Australia? You had communications. What? 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 Australian citizens, and none of them told y'all this? I had no idea I'd needed one. Maxwell had always handled those matters for me before. I was almost hysterical with fear. If they sent me back to Bangkok, I didn't know what I'd do. I thought of the time back in Florida when Tony stole the tip money and got me fired, and I'd have no choice but to go crawling back to Epstein. Was this going to be like that? A brief escape followed by a pitiful return to purgatory. In my despair, I yearned for Robbie, who by this point was somewhere above the South China Sea. But I was going to have to figure this out on my own. Girly Pop, you have been figuring things out on your own for quite a while at this point. And I know that as victims, as survivors of different types of abuse, you can get lost. You can forget the strength that you have. You can forget your ingenuity. You can forget how crafty you had to become in order to survive. I don't think I've ever been more persuasive. It helped that I was telling the authorities the truth, that I had just married an Australian citizen. I showed them the 7 strings around my wrist. A marriage certificate would have. Let's continue. Where was the marriage license? They wanted to know. Of course, I didn't have one. Later, we'd end up having to get married in Australia to make our union legal. So he pulled a Deion Sanders. And for those that are not aware, once upon a time, Deion Sanders had a wife that he married on a beach in another country. They never filled out any paperwork or anything. And then when tensions got high and she was like, I want a divorce, he was like, you don't need a divorce. You can just move out. But I pulled out several of the photographs Matt had taken with my fun saver, feeling grateful that I had hurried to get them developed. The customs officials looked at the photos, then back at me, and then a miracle. They let me get on my connecting flight. 8 hours later, I arrived in Sydney and stepped into the terminal feeling both exhilarated and anxious. Robbie's Sorry, something just dawned on me. So Robbie moved out of his parents' house, then started living with an Asian woman, a Korean woman. And then he decided he had to skedaddle over Thailand. Oh, I know why Robbie was over in Thailand. She traded one Epstein in for another. Robbie's parents were coming to meet us, and since I'd landed before Robbie, I would need to introduce myself. Coming out of the baggage area, I saw an older couple behind a rope, a wiry, white-haired gentleman and a stout, broad-shouldered woman whose round face was framed by an auburn pixie cut. They looked like the people that Robbie had described. I took a deep breath and headed towards them, forcing a smile. "I'm Jenna," I said, extending my hand, which Nina and Frank each shook, nodding politely. Then we just stood there together, not talking, waiting for Robbie. I'd soon learned that Frank spoke little English, but I didn't know that then. So the silence made me worry they already disapproved of me. That ain't got nothing to do with his mama. Once again, they know their son. They know their son. They thought you was there for a good time, not a long time. Finally, after what seemed like an hour, but was only a few minutes, I glimpsed Robbie walking towards us down a long hallway. Relief washed over me. Slipping under the rope separating us from the passengers only area, I sprinted until I was in his arms. We'd made it, together. Now our new life could truly begin. Girl, you just got in there by the skin of your teeth. You already breaking rules. You know, must be nice. Well, that concludes chapter 18. We will pick up with chapter 19 tomorrow. Oh my goodness, this one piece of hair. Same time, same place, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central. If you missed any parts of tonight or any other parts, you can go to YouTube at TazJ77 or click the link in my bio and go to the playlist Nobody's Girl, and you will have everything in order and it's labeled for whatever you missed. The subject matter is heavy. At times, when it is appropriate, I do try to make light of it because we need to woosah and exhale. But if any parts of this gets too heavy for you, because I know that there are survivors, there are relatives of survivors of multiple types of abuse that are interested in this case and interested in this memoir. Please take time for yourself. If you feel the strain is too much, step away, come back, seek assistance. Okay? But as always, thank you for joining me here, and I will see you later. Be safe, be good to yourself, and be good to others. Till tomorrow. Good evening. Once again, thank you for joining me for the series Learning Through Literature as we continue to go through the memoir of Virginia Roberts Giuffre entitled Nobody's Girl. If you're not familiar with Virginia Roberts Giuffre, she was one of the most vocal of the Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein victims. Unfortunately, she did take her life before the publication of her memoir. Preemptive trigger warning. This book does discuss various forms of abuse, specifically and more often than not, intimate abuse. So please take time away if you need to. If you missed any parts of this, or if you have to step away and you miss any parts tonight, there is a playlist by the same name, Nobody's Girl, at TazJ77, or you can click the link in my bio. Tonight, we pick up at chapter 19, entitled Down Under. When I picture myself during my first few days in Australia, I have to laugh. I am standing behind the stove in my in law's kitchen, learning how to make coffee the Italian way, one strong cup at a time. I pour water into a tiny silver percolator, then spoon finely ground coffee into the sieve like reservoir through which hot water will soon flow. It's a cozy scene, except for what I'm wearing, a skimpy undershirt and Daisy Duke cutoff shorts with my thong underwear protruding from my waistband. It was a different time. It was a different time. To see me, you might think I'm trying to show off my body, but that isn't right. While in Epstein's employ, I'd been encouraged to wear clothes that made me look even younger than I was. Now, no longer Epstein's captive, I was a wife, a grown woman, but I still felt and dressed like a teenage girl. I didn't have the slightest idea how an adult version of me should look. When I moved into Frank and Nina's house, that was just the beginning of what I didn't know. I had never loaded a dishwasher, for example, or scrambled an egg, or separated laundry into darks and lights. I'd never opened a bank account, or filed income taxes, or made a good cup of coffee. The list went on and on. Sometimes the weight of my ignorance overwhelmed me. What is adulthood, I wondered, and will I ever master it? Honey, none of us do. None of us do. What is it to be a wife? It would take time for me to figure out the answers. Our first weekend in Australia, Robbie took me camping in Hunter Valley, north of Sydney, with a group of his friends. The place is one of the country's major wine regions, but we had so little money that Robbie decreed we were there to rough it and enjoy the natural beauty, not to sip Shiraz. What a Shiraz left him. You're not taking me to wine country and I can't at least have a sip or a whiff. I was good with that until I saw where we were sleeping. A ramshackle shed. This misspelled tramp stamp, yes. And the misspelled tramp stamp chicken from yesterday. I don't know why she's shocked that they were staying in a ramshackle shed. They stayed in a bungalow with a stranger that robbed them. I may not be the most worldly person, but I would know not to travel with somebody like that again. That weekend was quite an introduction to my new country. Yes, we saw a few Aboriginal cave paintings, but the weather was freezing, and the only kangaroo we spotted appeared to have been dead for months. One, why are we walking up on deceased wildlife? Two, I'm no kangaroo expert, okay? But from one particular family out of Australia, I do know you really don't want a kangaroo spotting. Like, you don't want to run up on them or them to run up on you in the wild. They fight, and they fight really well. Like, really, really well. Like, they're born muscular. This is why people think that we Americans are stupid. This Yeah, I've heard that kangaroos are bullies, and I've seen a few videos. A few days after our return, I felt terribly ill with some sort of flu. You were sleeping outside in the cold. But what is our motto for this series? We listen and we don't judge Virginia. We judge everyone else. When I spiked a fever, Robbie was at work. He'd gotten a construction job. I felt awful, clammy, and hot. I didn't want to be a pain in anyone's ass, and especially since I'd just learned the Aussie phrase, having a whinge, complaining for no reason, I was determined to be stoic. That's how people die. But when Robbie's dad discovered how sick I was, he swung into action, whipping up his special Zupa, Zupa de Lentici. I hope that's correct. I don't speak Italian. It's one of the languages I don't speak. And remember, we're going through this together in real time. There's no pre-reading of this. Or lentil soup. I was too weak to get out of bed, but Frank propped me up on my pillows and then sat beside me, feeding me spoonfuls until I was full. Later, as I passed in and out of sweaty, delirious sleep, he returned every few minutes to cool my forehead with a damp cloth. When my fever broke, Frank brought me coffee that was creamy from the raw egg he'd stirred into it. Hmm. Hmm. I may try that. After I'd recovered, Frank sat with me and showed me how to peel a prickly pear, teaching me to avoid the nettles, which will embed themselves like fiberglass in your fingers if you aren't careful. Australia, you're never beating the accusations that you're one, not a real place, and two, you're dangerous for everybody. He didn't say much, just as Robbie had warned that he wouldn't. But in those first few weeks that I was in Sydney, Frank gave me more nurturing than I ever got from my own father. The women of the Giuffre clan were more skeptical of me. Robbie's mom, especially, is blunt and quick to call out wrongdoing, and at first she was suspicious of the skinny American who'd crash landed on her doorstep. Then, just before Christmas, Nina took me to the home of some of Robbie's aunties, or Zias. It was cannoli making day, and I was being drafted to help. I knew nothing about making cannoli, of course, but I quickly figured out the assembly line. Pounding out the dough, then rolling it thin and wrapping it around bamboo poles, then we dipped into a fryer, taking care not to burn them. Then we stuffed the crispy shells with three kinds of fillings: ricotta, vanilla cream, and chocolate. We must have made 300 cannoli that day, and when I returned home, I had ricotta in my hair, but I'd passed some sort of test. The Zias were proud of me. Honey, they weren't standoffish because they were suspicious of you. They were standoffish because they wasn't sure how long he was going to keep you around. Like I said yesterday, you know they're relative. Okay, we all have that Rolling Stone ain't shit relative. Gender aside, gender is not relative here. Um, and sometimes we got to take a step back because we've been burned before where we got emotionally attached to somebody and then they're gone with the wind. That's what they were doing. That's what it didn't have anything to do with you. Mm-mm. Because he moved out of his parents' house, but went and got him a wife and moved back into his parents' house. Okay. Married life took some getting used to. Yes, you have to learn how to share your stuff. I'm learning that right now. You have to share. There's somebody else in the house that's gonna touch your stuff. Gonna Yeah. I couldn't get a work permit until we were legally married, which we had which we would accomplish in January 2003. But already, Robbie was working all the time, trying to make good on his promise to provide for me. I helped out when I could with the Giuffre family catering business, hauling steam trays, doing dishes, waitressing when needed. I liked keeping busy and contributing to this family I'd just joined. But at the same time, I was struggling to come to terms with my new existence. Robbie's and my sex life, for example, I was fiercely attracted to him, but I still sometimes had trouble letting myself fully enjoy being with him in bed. Before Robbie, I'd been sort of a zombie when it came to sex, going through the motions, keeping my true self under a psychic lock and key. I had also been trained to do things that Robbie found downright weird. I remember the first time I jumped out of bed right after we'd made love, only to return with a warm, wet washcloth. When I tried to clean Robbie up, like Epstein had required me to do, my husband took hold of my wrist. "You don't have to do that," he said gently. "That's not right. Lay down with me instead." Didn't they do the Uchi Coochie Wally Wally while they was in Thailand? Okay. I did as he asked, and I never brought a washcloth to bed again. But while this should have been a relief, it also left me confused. That act, however demeaning, had been expected of me for so long, and I'd been praised for it. Now that I wasn't doing it anymore, I was unsure what to do with myself instead. It was difficult just to relax. That right there, I mean, I know some people that even to this they still do that right after coitus. They clean up immediately afterwards. mm, so I don't know. What do you like and not like? in bed. Robbie asked soon after we met. Now, little by little, I began to acknowledge that there were things I wasn't comfortable with. For example, I wasn't wild about giving blowjobs. Too many memories of unwelcome hands pushing on the back of my neck, forcing me to swallow. And receiving oral sex only reminded me of my dad. You poor baby. Oh, oh, that should not, those two things should not be attached. Those two things should not be attached. Those two things should not be attached. Whew. Mm. Hmm. I don't know. I'm okay, Harley. Thank you. It's a good girl. I'm okay. I promise. This was a lot for Robbie, hearing how much my past abusers had ruined for me, and also for him. What the? Robbie, let's go have a cup of coffee. Let's have a cup of coffee, Robbie. When he first realized how much I was effectively removing from the menu of our intimate life, Robbie looked a little stunned. But then he made it okay. There were lots of ways to make each other feel good, he told me, as we lay around in bed. I want you to feel. Wait a minute. I want you to feel. Wait a minute. I want you to feel I loved. I want you to feel. Yeah, that's what it says. I want you to feel. I want you to feel loved, he said. Reading from a Kindle. I did feel loved most of the time, but then my past would intervene. I didn't want to think about the billionaires, the prime minister, and all the others, but sometimes during sex, a contorted face would pop into my head. And I'd remember this was awful in myriad ways, experiencing flashbacks in the first place, obviously, but also trying to shield Robbie from knowing it was happening. Baby, that's your husband. Don't shield it. But Robbie is your husband, so I get it. I wanted both to protect him and at the same time to keep him from knowing how damaged his new wife really was. But whenever Robbie got an inkling that I was trying to hide something, he felt as if I were shutting him out. We were a team, he said. We needed to deal with these things together. I knew that made sense, but at times, that kind of wide open togetherness was more than I could handle. Exactly, chicken. He's a big boy. He can handle it. I mean, he. While we were still living with his parents in Sydney, Robbie, knowing how much I missed Mary Jane, the Chow Chow I'd left in Florida, bought me a Jack Russell Terrier. Just a pet peeve of mine. I am a stickler for, yes, you should be comfortable wherever you are. If you're in a situation where, yeah, you may have to cohabitate with somebody else for a period of time. But if you're moving in with your spouse, maybe wait till y'all get your own place before you get a puppy. Because training puppies are messy. Training puppies are noisy. Maybe don't bring that into somebody else's domicile. I named him Champion, Champ for short, and he gave my days structure. Like any dog, Champ needed to be walked, which got me out of the house. But his unrelenting Jack Russell brain also demanded that I engage with him constantly. I couldn't just retreat into my own memories. Champ wouldn't allow it. Being driven by the needs of others was familiar to me, but with Champ, that was a healthy impulse. If so much structure was needed, one, where was the mother during the day? Because when she got sick, the father was there to be able to take care of her. Kudos, whatever, whatever. But if structure was needed, she couldn't get a work permit, but they have a family business. Why didn't they just incorporate her into the... You know what? Let's just keep going. Let's we listen and we judge. Everyone but Virginia. Robbie and I had always planned to move out of his parents' home eventually. Well, I would hope so. But Champ's arrival hastened that decision. Frank and Nita were from the old country, so they believed animals should be kept outside. My need to have Champ on my lap at the table in our bed made them crazy. At the table? Thus far, we are to chapter 19 in this book. This is the first time I can truly say, Virginia, it's a white people shit. At the table, you're not helping my case, Harlan. Thank you. you're you're not helping. This is what people say I do white people shit. You're not helping my case. Absolutely not. She not. Soon as I said there, here she comes like, no, you're not talking about people be. So in early 2003, Robbie and I moved into our first apartment in Parramatta, a bustling, artsy, multicultural neighborhood. The walls of our tiny two-bedroom, second floor walk-up were thin. I remember our lovely Indian next-door neighbors had a new baby whose cries we heard at all hours. I'm also sure they heard Robbie and me fighting. That's your focus. Too often, usually after drinking too much, we'd go at it hammer and tong. Why didn't I clean the house? He'd yell when he was working so hard. I thought y'all was a team. Why couldn't he come home earlier? I'd scream. When he knew I was so lonely, sometimes he'd call me on his lunch break and I'd just be waking up. What are you doing? Just faffing around? He'd ask, using Aussie slang for wasting time. Jenna, you're acting like a child. That made me angry, but the truth was that in some ways I still was a child. So, oh, well, I don't know if it's the right way to pronounce it or not. I'm winging it here. A perfect example. We were so poor that at first we couldn't even afford a sofa. Where was the stuff from where Robbie was living before he went to Thailand and came back? Did he just give it all to his friend? I don't know. But Robbie scrimped and saved, and one morning before he left for work, he gently nudged me awake. I know how much you love shopping, he said, stroking my face. Go out today and buy us some furniture. He handed me $1,000 in cash. This won't get us much. You'll probably need to go to a secondhand store, but it'll be a start. Hold on. So they don't have any furniture. What is she supposed to be cleaning? What is there to get up and do? They have the dog, but no children, no furniture. Okay. I mean, That night, when he came home, I proudly showed him what I'd found for us an Xbox game console. We listen and we don't judge Virginia. Jenna, are you kidding me? Robbie said, trying not to laugh or explode or both. I thought it'd be fun, I said. It comes with two controllers so we can play together. But we have nowhere to sit, Jenna. What were you thinking? I felt embarrassed and defensive. What was I thinking? Is that all you do is work? I fumed. I was just trying to bring some laughter into the house. What I didn't say, because I was ashamed to admit it, was that the thought of going to a furniture store alone had paralyzed me. I didn't know how to shop for furniture because I'd never seen anybody do it. I was afraid of doing it wrong, so I'd blown all of our money on something I knew how to buy, a toy. No, she got the Xbox. The fact was that I was unprepared to run a household. One morning, I came into the kitchen and encountered the hugest spider I'd ever seen, just enjoy itself on the wall next to the sink. I can deal with many things that make other people squeamish. Worms don't scare me. Who's really afraid of worms? You know what? Let me not say that because I'm pretty sure that is a genuine fear of somebody out there, and I don't want to sound like I'm being judgy because I'm not. Snakes are a breeze. But spiders? Ever since Forrest and my dad took me to see arachnophobia with them, I've been deadly afraid. So I called Robbie at work and said I needed him to come home. I'm sorry, sweetie, he said, sounding distracted. I can't leave. Now, in her defense, Australian spiders are a different breed, okay? Because if I were to walk into the kitchen and there was an Australian spider just chilling, that's their house now. That is their domicile. That is their residence. Okay, that is their mailing resident. Okay, that's theirs. That is all theirs. Yeah, sounds distracted. I mean, he's at work and he's working in construction. I don't know why he answered the phone working in construction, but maybe he thought she had an emergency. I don't know. But it's looking at me, I pleaded, risking a glance at the spider's many eyeballs. You know what? It's a little funny, but it's not funny because I understand where she's coming from. I probably would have said the same thing, but I would have been on the other side of the front door. I would have been on the outside of that apartment, not on the inside. Is it a huntsman? He asked. Why do people ask that? If I tell you, hey, there's a spider, come and get it, evidently I am not a spider expert. Don't start asking me what's its name, what category it's in, if it's venomous. I don't know. It's scary, okay? Anything with more than two eyes gives me heart palpitations. What's a huntsman? I practically screamed. Robbie explained. The huntsman spider, also known as the giant crab spider, looks a little like a tarantula but bigger. And, of course, one of the places on the planet that the huntsman spider thrives is Australia. The monster I was having a staring contest with looked as big as a dessert plate. Yeah, it's time to go. That's his house or her house, whatever. It's a huntsman, I said, hoping that would motivate Robbie to come save me. But he just laughed. Darling, you could sleep next to that spider, he said. It's ugly, but it won't hurt you. I don't believe you. Well, that did nothing to reassure me, so I hung up on Robbie and called his dad, who came right over with a broom. I'll kill it for you, he said valiantly. I'll kill it dead. And soon the huntsman was no more. You know what? I feel like Robbie's father is very underrated in this family and overlooked, and their budding friendship is because he's like, you know what? Somebody appreciates me, and my skill set is useful to this young lady. It's useful to my daughter-in-law. So hey, I'm coming to the rescue. Because first of all, I wouldn't have called him. Like I said, I would have been on the other side of the door. Now, most people are like, don't leave the spider alone because they can go and hide somewhere. I don't care. They can hide wherever they want. That's their house now. That is now their mailing address. I'm getting my stuff forwarded. I'm not even going to pack from that house. Wardrobe, everything. That's theirs. They got it. Yeah, they do. They do like they huntsmen. I wish my own father had treated me with similar care. Sometime in this period, I got Dad on the phone. He and my mom had separated. They'd had many problems, mostly your father being a pedophile. That would be a huge problem in a relationship, in a marriage. So, but now I was hearing that Mom had decided that Dad liked to dress in women's clothes. Well, that's a curveball I didn't see coming. That was a bridge too far. Not the pedophilia, not the physical abuse, not the gambling, not none. I could live with the dressing in the women's clothes. I can't live with the rest of the stuff. Like, yeah, pish posh. We can share a dress or two. That was it. They were headed for a divorce. They'd sold the Rackley Road house where I'd grown up, and my mom had moved to Colorado. But Dad was still living in Florida, so I asked him to get my Dodge truck back from Tony and then sell it for me. I was hoping it would fetch several $1,000s. Did you forget how Tony treats things? Because I didn't forget. Girl, you might be able to get $20 in a pack of Newports. I also asked Dad to pawn or sell everything in a storage locker I'd rented. Among other things, the locker contained a chandelier and a few antiques my grandma Shelley had left me. Dad agreed and said he'd wired me the proceeds. You should have trusted somebody else. I feel like this is going badly. This is going to go bad. But this was my father, so I guessed I shouldn't have been surprised when I went to collect the wire. All he sent me was $500, a fraction of what he'd likely been paid for my things. You got two brothers. Two. You should have asked either one of them. Now, understand Scotty is younger than you, and I can't remember how old he would have been in 2003, 2004. But you have an older brother that would have done you right. And I understand wanting to still believe the best in your parents, even when your parents are your abusers. Still wanting to have that connection, especially when you're in a situation where somebody else's parents are beginning to parent you and show you love and kindness and respect and things like that. You want to believe that you can still have that with your parents. But baby girl, baby girl, baby girl. Daddy might be my brother. He's shady like that. I think we all got some relatives that are shady like that. Like, I have one that to this day is still lying. I know that they never went and got stuff of mine out of one particular house. And they're mementos from my grandfather that I will never get back. And they lied. And I ended up having to like replace a bunch of stuff. That was a problem for a lot of reasons. Not least of which was that I was still kicking an expensive habit, Xanax, that I used to help blot out my trauma. Back in Laos, I dumped most of my supply in a toilet because I feared that being apprehended with drugs might get us thrown in jail. But I still had a small stash and it was running out. Girl, how much did you have? What did you consider small? Because y'all been out of Thailand for a while. Not that I admitted this to Robbie. While I'd been honest with my husband about the range of damaging experiences I'd endured, I think he expected that the further away I got from those incidents, the better I'd feel. Instead, the opposite seemed to be happening. Memories I've tamped down for years were now coming up, unbidden in vivid detail. Disturbing images would pop into my head during the day. The black leather, studded collar Epstein had choked me with, the greedy, cruel look on the Prime Minister's face as he watched me beg for my life. I was haunted by nightmares, my abusers looming over me, about to pounce, and me unable to get away. Frequently, I was jolting myself awake with my side of the bed soaked in sweat. I hated waking Robbie up, so I'd just cuddle closer to him. You okay? He'd mumble. Yeah, just another one of those dreams, I'd say, as he'd wrapped his arms around me and dozed off again. He ain't noticed you was soaking wet? Again, I don't like Robbie. Nevertheless, I was not yet willing to acknowledge how much pain I was in or how much I'd relied on anti anxiety meds in the past. The truth was that my Xanax pills had been like life rafts for me, and getting off them revealed how quickly I was sinking. One day, Robbie came home from work and found me sitting on the floor in the corner of our apartment, surrounded by blood and broken glass. I had been cutting myself, not trying to kill myself, but instead using the clarity of inflicting my own pain. but instead using the clarity of inflicting my own pain to quiet my raging demons. Robbie took one look at me. Okay, we're getting reported again, so I'm going to finish this paragraph and then we're going to stick a pin in it so we don't lose this footage. Called his mother. He told me later that he could just tell by the look in my eyes that this was a mom moment. When Nina arrived, she swooped in like a Bosamy angel, kicking the shards of glass away and taking me into her arms. She must have held me for an hour, rocking me, telling me it would be all right. Then she took me to the bathtub, stripped off my clothes, and tenderly washed me as if I were her own child. Once again, Robbie's parents were giving me what I'd missed since I was a tiny girl. Yeah, we'll stick a pin in those thoughts. I do not know why every Friday somebody wants to come in and report this. But since we only got through half of this, I will come back tomorrow after we wrap the Porch of No Judgment, and we'll finish out chapter 19. So, as always, thank you all for joining. If you missed any parts of this, you can view it on the YouTube channel. I will not put this part up until we complete chapter 19 tomorrow. Then I will splice them together. Then I will upload them. But have a great night.